Hello and welcome. I'm Jennifer from Joy of Stationery, and today's video comes from a request for a video on how I approach time management, particularly in relation to work, to personal life, etc. And this is a question that I've been thinking a lot about. I would probably say that my love for and interest in planning comes from my struggles with time management. I have long been trying to find the best sort of time management system for myself. For today's video then, what I will try to do is offer some considerations, at least in how I have approached things, and in a way it also relates to certain reflections that I have about my work-life balance, about the nature of the work that I do as well, and maybe some of the steps that I've taken to get a little bit closer to a kind of time management system that works, and that often equates to a kind of planning system that works for me, and ways that I can look to different planners and touchers and stationery to bring in the things that give me joy, right, in my life. So I think that what I'll do is think about it in sections. And the first, I am tentatively calling it reflections and reminders. And so these are some of the questions or some of the reminders that are helpful for me to think about and to consider, to reflect on as I think about what my priorities are, but also how it is that I view time. The second part, I will try to offer some methods that I have recently kind of discovered and thought about myself, and I wanted to share them in case it helps anybody else as well. And then sort of the third and final portion is what I'm tentatively calling resistance and recovery, a way to keep certain things in mind when approaching the work-life balance and the kinds of things that, at least for me, have helped with my time management. So I'll begin with, again, what I kind of was thinking would be kind of reflections and reminders. So the first question has to do with what primary way of viewing or experiencing time seems to come the most naturally or the most easily to you. What I mean by that might be addressed in some ways by the kinds of planners or techos that you gravitate towards. Do you gravitate towards weekly planners, a specific type of weekly view, whether it's a vertical view or a horizontal view, or do you gravitate towards daily planners, 1 page per day or perhaps 2 pages per day? Do you gravitate towards monthly calendars? And so the reason that I bring that up is because it's a question that came up as I thought about how I approach time management and what seems to work for me. And so just as an example of this, first of all, you'll see that I now have the A6 Tokyo Metronome cover from the 2023 Hobonichi release, and I'm so happy about it. So I moved in right away. But so what I have in here is my Hobonichi avec in the A6 size that I've been using. And what I'd been noticing ever since I really kind of thought about it more consciously for One Book July is the way that I do often gravitate towards a daily planner, meaning at least kind of 1 page per day, because that gives me enough kind of room for things like tasks. And so what I do appreciate about the Hobonichi avec, are the ways that it has 1 day per page. And I've been experimenting a little bit with how that works best given the layout. And the reason that the daily is helpful for me is because I think that I tend to feel more at ease if I know that I have a space, a full kind of page, even if it's a small page, just because I tend to like the A6 size, that is dedicated to that day. So I know that I will have the space to be able to, for example, list out tasks, list out certain reminders or gratitude, list out certain priorities. And so it's kind of the, not just kind of the day by day approach, but even just the kind of reassurance that I have that space. That's really helpful for me. I'll speak a little bit more on this in just a moment, but I actually want to first talk a little bit about the monthly calendar. So what I really love about the avec is the fact that it has both the monthly calendars as well as the daily, even if it doesn't have a weekly, and I will speak more to that as well. So I think that, I've been talking about the dailies, but I do tend to feel the most sense of having a grasp on my appointments, schedule, kind of maybe time in general. If I have a monthly that I know that I can look back at for reference and that I know is being kept up to date with whatever, again, appointments, meetings, events that I may have. And this has a lot to do with, at least for me, the nature of the work that I do as an academic, given that there are multiple sources competing for my attention. There is the university that I work at. There is my sort of professional field at large, and perhaps certain organizations, professional organizations that I'm a member of. And there are also other professional academic institutions that I might be affiliated with or that I've been invited to do events with. So the fact that there are these sort of, in some ways, I guess, different kinds of institutions and organizations that are actually all a part of the work that I do means that it is really important for me to be able to have a dependable, reliable monthly calendar. So that means that, I might have certain kinds of university deadlines, university responsibilities and commitments. I can have those on the monthlies, but then I can add all these other kinds of responsibilities, events, appointments, and meetings that, and have them all kind of centralized on a monthly. The one thing that I struggle with a little bit with a monthly layout such as the one in the A6 is that because of kind of multiple institutions that I need to be accounting for in my planning, sometimes there are a number of meetings from different kinds of institutions on a particular given day. And so the space and the monthly may not actually be enough. So I have been experimenting throughout my sort of planning life with how much information to include on kind of a monthly view. So that's still something that is in flux, but I'm sort of doing what I can with what information that I think might be useful. And this is where last year in 2022, I was using the Hobonichi Cousin, which is the A5 size, and I did really love the space that I had for the monthly view in that book. So it's something that I might return to in the future. Who knows? But nonetheless, this is the reason why the monthlies are so important to me. And then the dailies, just because similarly with what I just mentioned about kind of competing, again, sort of like different institutional commitments and responsibilities kind of competing for my attention, I tend to have a task list that, isn't just specific to just my university or, again, just one other institution. It's kind of a collection of all of those things that I have to kind of synthesize into, let's say, one task list for the day, as well as things that might be kind of ongoing that I have to kind of remind myself about. And so because of that, the daily, again, is the space to go from the kind of macro of the monthly to a little bit more of the micro and have more room to be able to attend to those details. I spoke a little bit about the way that I'm using MILESTONES in my last video on my sort of August mid-month status or update. And I have changed a little bit again, where I've brought my tasks back into the Hobonichi avec on the left-hand column. And this is actually similar to what I've seen Helen from the Coffee Monsters Company do, and her cousin is kind of use that left-hand column for tasks. So that's something I decided to kind of bring back in literally as of the 18th of August. Just to give that a try again. And, you know, I'll be doing an update at the end of the month anyway with how some things have changed. Otherwise, something new that I had done that I mentioned in my last video is doing a kind of daily gratitude. And what that really is a kind of ritual that I tried out and began to realize how that helped with my time management as well. And so this is just a series of prompts, a series of questions, again, 3 for the morning, 3 for the evening, that I realized formed a really helpful kind of frame or foundation for my day. And this was really helpful in terms of time management, in the sense that it gave me an opportunity to do a little bit of reflection about my current sort of state in a way that I didn't build in for myself previously. I used to be someone who had a long task list, and when the day began, I would just jump right into the tasks, trying to kind of get them done, but without kind of that foundational reflection. And so the 3 questions, and I'll try to put this up on the video as well, are, you know, the first is today's mantra. And so I found that it's kind of a helpful way to just set a certain kind of intention for the day. The second one is I am feeling. And so again, that gives me just a little bit of that little bit of space just to kind of reflect on how it is that I'm feeling. And then third, my needs today are. And so once again, kind of reflecting on, well, what are my needs today? How can I kind of keep these things, right? Intentions, my own feelings, my own needs at the forefront of my mind as I go about my day, as I go about my task list. And that helps to ground me a little bit more and feel a little bit, you know, that kind of grounding can really help with time management as well. So it's not just kind of a frantic frenzy trying to, you know, check off a bunch of tasks, but rather starting the day with that kind of mindfulness that I have noticed this month has made a difference. And then the same goes with kind of the evening reflection that consists of the prompt, today I am grateful for, and you can kind of list any number of things that you'd like. The second one is the highlight of the day. And the third one is what would make tomorrow better. And so, again, it's a way to sort of close the chapter or close the book on the day in a way that I didn't conscientiously or sort of consciously do before, right? I would just kind of, I would have tried to accomplish a bunch of things on my task list and be exhausted by the end of the day without giving myself the space to reflect on the day and to once again kind of get back to that space of mindfulness that actually is much more conducive to protecting my energy, or at least to kind of prioritizing and reflecting on my energy. And again, what I've actually found is not only does it help to kind of close the book on the day in a way that, you know, not only wraps it up in a mindful way, as well as prepares for the next day with the question of what would make tomorrow better. But also in having to reflect on and kind of remember what I was grateful for that day and what the highlight of the day was. It's actually served as a really, really helpful memory keeping tool for myself. And so because, now my planner, the daily pages are kind of populated with that, I can look at any daily page and see what I was grateful for that day and the highlight of the day and think, oh, that's right, this is the day that this particular thing happened, rather than these daily pages simply being, purely about tasks, which also means that, I've allowed for the daily page to be more of a reflection of a kind of work-life balance in a way, as opposed to it being completely filled up with just work-related things, which, again, in the way that the page is laid out and what you write on it will reflect the kind of balance that's in your life. And for a very long time, and something that's I still have a tendency to do, my life tended to be pretty unbalanced in terms of being very work heavy and kind of work focused without really much consideration about other life related things, including health. And this is what kind of led to a crisis that is now kind of informing why I'm taking these steps now. So this is an example of what way of kind of experiencing or visualizing time tends to come most naturally or easily to me. And I think that's where the kind of dailies and the monthlies come in this way. And this provides me a certain kind of macro and micro look at things. I also wanted to kind of mention something that I did a little bit earlier that I might bring back. And this was in some of the field notes I was using in June and July, particularly during One Book July. And it was having this, this is just kind of a calendar that I drew on the front page here. And it's in some ways a kind of multi-week or multi-month calendar. No appointments or anything necessarily written down on here, although you can make a key and do that. But for me, it always helps for me to have a sense of what kind of the larger timeline is looking like for some reason. I think the reason for that is that with dailies and daily tasks, I can get a little bit tunnel vision and hyper focus in a way. And this is always really helpful for me just to kind of give myself a sense of a larger perspective on time and the calendar in a way. So even going beyond the monthly, the monthly, of course, in the EVEC is crucial in terms of keeping a log of the, again, the various appointments coming from different sources and different institutions. But this is really just for the kind of longer view, right? A slightly more longue durée look at the calendar and the time, just to get a sense of kind of where I am in the year, if that makes sense. And, I'll have to reflect a little bit more on how that's on articulating how exactly this is serving me, but it does seem to give me a sense of perspective and a sense of, again, kind of long-term timing. I think because so much of my work also as an academic tends to, run across several months perhaps, or across even years in terms of certain kinds of writing projects and publications. It is really helpful to, as a kind of practice, I think, to just have longer bits of time in mind and to start, or at least, I think, in a sense, to get me used to kind of thinking ahead in larger chunks of time as I, continue to kind of get used to long-term deadlines and pacing my work out for those kinds of things. So this is something that I just wanted to show as kind of again, part of that question and part of how I've addressed that question. So this also brings me to then something that Himawari Stationery mentioned in the most recent video with regard to the Hobonichi weeks, and it was this idea that she sees the day really in the context of the week, and so it's most helpful for her to look at the week at a glance. And this is where I have another version of the question for myself. So not only what kind of experience of time comes most easily to me, but also what experience of time appeals the most to me. And I've long found the idea of a weekly view, right? A week at a glance to be really appealing to me. And I've not yet cracked the code for myself for how to make that work until more recently. And I think this is something that I'm trying out now. I do like the idea of the week at a glance precisely because it helps to bridge the more kind of macro and micro ways that I tend to look at time, the monthly and the daily. Those seem to come a lot more easily to me. But I think having that happy medium in terms of a weekly view can be really helpful. I just haven't yet found, what works best for me. So because I am now using in the standard TN, as I mentioned in my last video, a weeks in the front that I'm finally putting to use again. What I have been doing here is something new for myself, or something that is kind of leading actually to my second section in terms of methods. So here's kind of my latest experiment with this. I have put the Hobonichi weeks in the standard Traveler's Notebook because I've been using this whole setup as a writing companion, my writing and research companion. So because so much of my kind of, professional life, my career sort of depends on writing projects and publications, I wanted a way to bring some of the things that I might need that might benefit from analog tools with me all into kind of the space of one notebook. So part of that system, as of recently, as I mentioned in my last video, is the inclusion of this Hobonichi weeks kind of in the front here. And this is because initially this Hobonichi weeks I had gotten at the end of last year for the very reason of kind of keeping track of writing and research in some fashion. I didn't know quite yet how that would be, but I wanted certainly to kind of experiment with different things. So here is the latest, and this is what has gotten me back into it, is having another way then to think about a weekly view for myself. Granted, in this particular case, because of what I need this for, it is specific to work, because I think that's where I felt the need most keenly in terms of needing a kind of weekly perspective. So for me, what this has looked like is, before I get to the actual kind of schedule and calendar part, which is the left-hand side of the Hobonichi weeks, I'll start with the right-hand side. This space, which is quite flexible, right? It's just a gridded space with what they call kind of the sort of secret line, has always been kind of a room for really interesting experimentation with page layout, and I'm always really inspired by seeing others kind of using the Hobonichi weeks in just really cool ways that work for them. And I've experimented with this a number of times and didn't quite find something that clicked, but I finally tried this out as something that I think might be helpful for me moving forward. And this is just in terms of how my brain works and what I think that I need from a space like this. So this I'm using as a space to keep track of all of my ongoing projects, at least in terms of what I can remember. And that last point is actually key and the reason why I even wanted to do this. I needed a way to keep track on a week-by-week basis of all the projects that are currently active, but all the ones that are also perhaps inactive on my end, but are perhaps waiting on next steps from, say, an editor, or waiting for revisions, proofs. So in the way that the publication process itself can also be periods of intense work, but also periods of waiting for the next stage. And so this was a way to even just list it out for myself, and I am thinking of continuing this for future weeks as well, and that will give me a sense on any given week when I flip to it on, what were the projects that were still ongoing at that time, week by week, until maybe a project has come to fruition or publication, or again, it's not just writing projects, but other kinds of projects related to conference papers, related to, invited panels, events, things like that, as well as other kinds of university admin or course design and course creation kinds of things. So the way that I've divided it up is to have kind of my ongoing writing projects kind of at the very top here, ongoing projects related specifically to teaching and course design and planning, ongoing projects related to what I'm calling the profession, so other institutions that are outside of my university but are also academic institutions in themselves, or perhaps are associated with my university but not just kind of not just within the university, but a little bit broader, right? So beyond the university as well. And then finally, ongoing projects that are perhaps specifically university specific. So that includes things like promotion, as well as, brand new course design, and other kinds of things that that I know I have to keep track of in terms of university specific kind of criteria or requirements to kind of keep in mind, or again, kind of subject area or department specific kinds of things. So, in some ways, some might think it's quite a bit of labor to have to kind of repeat this on every page. But for me, what's helpful about it is that I am someone who needs reminders. And so for me, this is actually kind of, I imagine that kind of writing this out week by week is a way to help make sure that I'm on track with all of the different projects that, again, are, as you can see, are kind of competing for my attention. And to have it laid out in this way just helps my mind to kind of understand, what it is that I have, right? What are the different categories? And now that I have them written down, I don't have to have them taking up room in my brain, but rather I know that week by week I'll have, right on the page with my weekly view, the kind of latest, most updated projects, and in some ways their status. I don't say too much about the status of each of them, but a little bit, right? And so having that instead of having that right next to the weekly is super helpful for me, just as a reminder, rather than having it on a separate page altogether and having to kind of flip back and forth between that page and the weekly. In terms of the weekly view then, I've separated it into two columns, kind of using the little guides that Hobonichi provides here. And on the left-hand column, I am doing a method that's called day theming. And this is something that I feel like I've perhaps tried a little bit in practice, but not knowing quite the fact that there was actually a term for it. But so this time doing it much more intentionally, and I think it's been helping me. I've tried it out for a few weeks now. And then this right-hand side column, a way to keep track of some tasks, but not to the extent that I do in the dailies. This is perhaps more kind of big stage project steps, or, maybe even milestones, even if they're somewhat minor milestones, but milestones that are kind of worthy of note in a weekly that are a little bit bigger than perhaps a daily step would be. And so that's what's kind of helping me differentiate between these larger kind of project specific milestones, perhaps, or steps, and the kinds of things that I would want to write down as a daily kind of task list. So in this segment, I just wanted to go over in a little bit more detail what I mentioned in terms of day theming, as well as what I started doing in terms of project milestones, which can also be altered to be something like task batching. So both of these terms, day theming and task batching, come from one particular productivity method that is called time blocking. And so time blocking is something that I had, I think, heard of in the abstract before. And it is a particular productivity method. So those of you who are well-versed in productivity methods, you may very well have heard of this. This is something that I think that I had once again put into practice in some ways without necessarily being conscious of the term given to it, or perhaps the specifics of how to go about doing this. I was inspired to try this out by an article from the Todoist app, which is a productivity app that helps you manage your tasks. And this was an app that my partner had told me about in the hopes that it would help me with kind of organizing the things that I had to do. And according to the Todoist article, time blocking is something that you can try if you fall into certain criteria. So for example, if you are juggling many different projects or responsibilities, which is certainly the case for a lot of academics. If you spend too much time in reactive mode, which means kind of responding to email and messages all the time. If you're somebody who finds their day chopped up by meetings, if you're battling constant interruptions throughout the day, and if you're somebody who kind of struggles to find the time and mental space for big picture thinking. I have mentioned time blocking in a previous video because this is the reason I had picked up a planner that had a vertical weekly view with not just kind of hourly demarcations, but on the half hour as well. And this is the Marks Colors cover. I have changed up this cover. This is a really cute postcard. This is not actually my cat, but this is a postcard from Kubo and Lucy. And so I believe this is a really cute photo of Lucy, the cat. But I just thought it was so adorable that I put it as the cover of this. But this was something that I wanted to pick up in order to just kind of block out segments of time and to kind of allot those segments to certain kinds of tasks or certain kinds of categories as a way to help with my time management, really, and with my productivity in some sense. This is a planner that begins in September, so I've not yet been using that aspect of it, but it was something that I had picked up precisely for the purpose of trying out a kind of time blocking, or at least to kind of sketch out time blocks that might help kind of inform me how best my energy, and time might be spent. But here for the Hobonichi weeks that I'm using as part of the writing TN, as I mentioned, on this left-hand side here, I am using the left-hand column specifically for day theming. So day theming is really a related version of time blocking, but focused on each day of the week. And so thinking in terms of, every Monday I will dedicate to this particular area of life or this particular type of task, for example. For myself, what I've tried the past few weeks, including this week, is not necessarily reserving each day of the week to a task that I'll be doing every single week. That's something that I might try maybe down the line, but instead thinking in terms of that particular week and what I have going on, and what I might want to theme each day on. So for this particular example, just to give you a sense, it can be as vague or as specific as I think you need it to be. So for Monday, for example, Monday was my recovery and taking stock day, and that's kind of what I wanted to theme the day on. Tuesday was my project progress day. Wednesday was my collaboration catch-up and recovery day. Thursday was a recalibration day. Friday was a kind of admin day. And I've marked off Saturday as reflection and review day and Sunday as planning day. And these two, Saturday as a kind of review day and Sunday as a planning day, I actually borrowed from the Todoist article as well, in the kind of example that they said. And so this idea that at the end of the week, Saturday can be used to do a kind of weekly review, and then Sunday can be spent with planning out the week ahead. So it was something that I was trying out. I wanted to try this as a method for time management, in the sense that because there are so many competing projects, as I've mentioned, I often need ways to compartmentalize things. And somebody actually, in a recent video that I saw, and I believe it was Cause Page and Studio, she has a video, I think, on a recent setup of the standard, sorry about the background noise. So Cause Page and Studio has a standard TN setup with an insert where she does her planning, and I think in the context of that video has sort of mentioned kind of setting out these particular days for studying or research or something, these other days as content creation days, and that's actually a really great example of day theming. So this is exactly the kind of thing that I think that I have really needed and wanted to kind of try out in order to, again, kind of compartmentalize certain kinds of tasks. Mine are still a little bit vague because I think I'm still experimenting with it and trying it out, but it's a way to feel like I can manage what sometimes seems like so many or kind of an overwhelming number of projects and tasks, all, at different stages of completion. So this is one way that I've approached a kind of time management, and I do think that it seems to be working. The right-hand column, as I mentioned earlier, what it's kind of become, at least this week, is a way to track certain project milestones. And this is something that I think I've struggled with as well, is sort of keeping track of, say, specific detailed tasks and the minutiae of kind of each step of a particular project, and then also marking what are kind of the larger steps, larger sort of noticeable stages of progress that one can keep track of. And so this is a way to sort of do that. So another way that I thought about doing this is another version of time blocking, which is called task batching, which I guess technically is when you group similar, sometimes smaller tasks together into one time block to be able to kind of complete them all at once. But this way, I think I saw it more as kind of, specific projects that I'll be working on that day and sort of batching a number of tasks related to that project together. So rather than, say, spreading myself out too thin and trying to work on too many projects in one given day, selecting specific ones that will be prioritized for that day, and then which kind of tasks or milestones that I'll be kind of focusing on for those projects. So these are just, again, two methods that I'm sort of trying out, but I think there's a lot of promise there, and I wanted to share them with you in case this would be helpful for any of you as well, as you're kind of thinking about how you approach time management, or at least in my case, approaching how to get better with time management. This is a way that I have been trying to put into action as a form of time management. Honestly, what Himawari Stationery kind of inspired in me, and kind of thinking about, if I think about the day in the context of a week, how might that also be a way that would help me manage my time, and a way to kind of manage my planning. And I'm really, really happy actually with how this has turned out. And I'm really hoping that it sticks. I think that it, again, might have some of the traction to be able to stick, but we'll continue to see. Nonetheless, I am really glad about this. And again, this is work specific because I felt like work was the area in which I really needed to have this kind of weekly view perspective, or that it might help with the kind of planning needs that I have for my work.